She frequently prefers this son to her other children. He's generally she often prefers this son to her husband, explicitly and openly.
Now, what is the role of the father during this time?
The father, in typical instances, is detached from this son. Not from all his sons, but from this son. Spends little time with him. He not infrequently minimizes the son, is contemptuous of him, humiliates him, is competitive with him, and resents the position put in by the mother, creating this coupling between the mother and this son.
Well, say that the son has a close binding, dominating mother. What can the father do to keep his son from developing a homosexual orientation?
The father can do a great deal, and he can be the determining figure, even in the presence of this type of mother. If, first of all, he recognizes this is his son as much as it is his wife's son. He has a warm, affectionate, supportive relationship with this son. If he spends time with him, if he interferes with some of the activity that this mother is carrying out, I do not believe that it is possible to produce homosexual if the father is a warm, good, supportive, constructive father to his son.
Most homosexuals do not consider themselves ill, and they are able to live with their condition fairly comfortably. On the other hand, there are those whose compulsive behavior becomes a problem for the police. This is an example. This 19-year-old serviceman left his girlfriend on the beach to go to a men's room in a park nearby where he knew that he could find a homosexual contact. The men's room was under police surveillance. The only faces you will see are those of the arresting officers.
Is anybody going to hear about this, like my parents? Your parents won't know of this, but your community commander will probably find out about it. A routine channel. Oh, God. I mean, I can get kicked out for that. You could, yes. But I couldn't take a record like that. Don't you realize that you guys are in a public park? Yeah, I realize. Anyone can walk into that men's room. Any child can walk in there and see what you guys were doing. Well, how do you think that would affect them mentally for the rest of their lives? They so and act like that. I realize that, but the thing is that for life I'll be wrecked by this record. See, I'm only 19, and this will ruin me. I couldn't take for anybody to know about this. What it do to my family and everything. You just told us that your girlfriend is down the beach. Right? She is. She's right down there now. She's down the beach this minute. Yes. And yet you're making a homosexual contact. I was down here. What's your explanation for that? It's not something I really need. It's just sort of, I don't know, curiosity sort of. So I'm perfectly happy with her. I love her. Well, why didn't you think of this before you did it? It's something that just happened. I don't know. I can't explain it. But I'm just 19. I mean, I don't know. I just know this is going to ruin his life.
For the police view of homosexuality, we talked to Inspector James Fisk of the Los Angeles Police Department.
During the year of 1964, we arrested 3,000 homosexuals who committed their lewd acts in public places. I can state conclusively that the problem is growing. I'm concerned with the moral atmosphere in the community. And I am opposed, as a matter of principle, to making anything which is improper or immoral conspicuous. And by this conspicuousness, making it easy for persons to engage in this kind of activity. The law itself is such that really there isn't a great deal we can do about those things which occur in private places. But the most important thing to emphasize here, I believe, and this applies also to other kinds of vice activity, that our primary effort goes to the reduction of prohibited behavior in public places.
By and large, homosexuals themselves agree with that view. There are numerous homosexual organizations across the country with a variety of names. Their membership is comparatively small, but their influence in the homosexual community is considerable. The head of the Mattachine Society in San Francisco is Hal Call.
In our view, the enforcement of laws which forbid public sexual behavior or overt demonstrations of affection and so on that lead to a sexual stimulus in public view, laws against that are appropriate and should be maintained. Laws which protect the young from their elders so that the young can have the opportunity to develop sexually along their own lines and within their own framework rather than to have ideas induced upon them by others. These laws we hold are good. Laws which involve which forbid the use of force or violence or any kind of harm or taking an unfair advantage in sexual matters, these are also good and will have to be maintained. However, we do feel in the Mattachine, and this is our strongest strongest part of our program, that the laws which forbid certain types of private consenting sexual behavior among adults need to be changed, so that what adults do willingly in private is their own affair.
Homosexual acts are not considered a crime in most countries in Western Europe, and the British are currently revising their laws to legalize homosexual behavior between consenting adults in private. In the United States, Illinois is the only state where such acts are legal. But nationally, as we said earlier, the CBS News Public Opinion Survey indicates that sentiment is against permitting homosexual relationships between consenting adults without legal punishment. The severity of the punishment varies from state to state. Judge James Braxton Craven of the Federal District Court in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Most doctors who have studied homosexuality agree that prison environment, including close, continuous, and exclusive contact with other men, aggravates and strengthens homosexual tendencies and provides unexcelled opportunity for homosexual practices. Is there any public purpose served by a possible 60-year maximum or even 5-year minimum imprisonment of the occasional or one-time homosexual without treatment? And if so, what is it? Are homosexuals twice as dangerous to society as second-degree murderers? Is there any good reason why a person convicted of a single homosexual act with another adult may be imprisoned 6 times as long as an abortionist, twice as long as an armed bank robber, and 730 times as long as the public drunk?
Beyond the question of legal reform, there is the moral issue which troubles many clergymen. The Bible condemns homosexuality. Through the centuries, churchmen have called it unnatural, unmanly, ungodly. And yet there is a tendency today among some of the clergy to take a less rigid position. For an indication of this change in religious attitudes, we talked first to Father William Beer, chairman of the psychology department at Fordham University.
The Catholic Church is quite clear in saying that the expression of homosexuality is sinful. It is a sin. But on the other hand, the Church is equally clear in saying that the tendency toward homosexuality is in itself blameless. So that the Church has a great deal of sympathy for those who are handicapped in this way, in having these kinds of tendencies, but it is only the expression of these tendencies that is sinful. So that the Church does not blame, it does not deprecate, it doesn't feel it is at all shameful for an individual to have homosexual tendencies. For these were not deliberately fostered. These are not blameworthy. So that although this has always been recognized as a problem, there is a great deal more willingness now, I think, to talk about this a great deal more frankly and to face this as a pastoral problem.
as an individual, I have to confess, and this is a humble confession, that I have this problem in my own emotions whenever a homosexual comes to me. I have the reaction of tending to pull away and to not want to come into physical contact. There's something here that just is wrong and perhaps even a little dirty. I'd like to believe that I have had some success in controlling this because I know it's wrong. It's wrong from the standpoint of being a Christian. And I confess we face a grave problem when we go before the general membership of the church and we say, here's a homosexual, is he acceptable? By that I simply mean, can you accept him with compassion and love and attempt to help him? And all too often, of course, the reaction is going to be one of revulsion. This I admit and recognize, and we have a constant battle with ourselves. This is sin on the part of the church. Our reaction in any situation ought to be one of compassion and concern, first of all, above everything else.
Most people think that homosexuality is confined to major cities. It is not. In 1955, there were reports of a homosexual underworld in Boise, Idaho. Population at the time, 34,000. The people of Boise tried to stamp out homosexuality. They discovered it couldn't be done. In the learning process, everybody suffered. It began with this headline in the Idaho Daily Statesman. The next day, the paper ran an editorial entitled, "Crush the Monster, Crush Homosexuality." The year-long investigation that followed shook Boise to its foundations. Everyone was suspect. Men were afraid to be seen together. Weekly poker games among men who had known each other for years were canceled. There were reports that many high school boys were involved. A prominent banker, a leading attorney were arrested, along with clerks, repairmen, salesmen. Altogether, hundreds were interrogated in this house on a quiet residential street. When it was over 15 months later, one homosexual was in a state penitentiary with a life sentence. 2 received 15-year terms, 1 10 years, 2 7 years, and scores of lives were ruined. Wayne Kidwell was 15 years old, a junior at Boise High School when all this took place. Now he is county prosecuting attorney. He represents a new generation with different ideas.
There's homosexual activity in Boise and probably every city in the United States there's homosexual activity, and certainly some prosecution. When you talk about prosecuting homosexuality, of course you have to break this down into categories so that you know what you're talking about. The prosecution of a homosexual that's involved with a young child, I think, is something that should exist. When you're talking about prosecution between consenting adults, I think that we have to take another look at it.
Well, when you say another look, what do you mean?
Well, I think that the laws right now as they're written are designed towards sex itself. And I think that this is somewhat undesirable to make sex per se illegal or to put connotations on it that would be undesirable. I think it would be better if the laws were written to prohibit the coercion, the unwillingness on the part of one of the parties involved, this part of it, actually the force that is involved. I feel that the laws should focus on this rather than the sex itself. As for myself, I think it's a healthy thing if we can talk about something like this.
Why?
I think it can be beneficial not only to Boise, but to anybody else that's concerned about this, that we know as much about it as possible, and that we put it in the proper perspective, and not make it something that we talk about in back rooms, or that young people have to be afraid when they mention the word homosexual.
Homosexual groups around the country feel the same way, and they're willing to stand up and be counted on the issue. Nonetheless, even though we live in an age of protest and demonstrations, this picket line in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia on July 4th was met with a degree of disbelief. It was a combined demonstration by various homosexual organizations intent upon raising a cry for their own civil